And tonight, much of the hate and hysteria on the left can easily be traced right back to America's college campuses, where America, capitalism, and Israel are all routinely vilified. Today on CNN, a former Columbia University student who just so happened to witness last night's murders here in Washington, D.C., spelled out the cold, hard truth. Take a look.
But what I saw in his eyes, I mean, I went to Columbia for grad school, and I saw the same thing in his eyes as I saw in the eyes of all the protesters at Columbia. Nothing different between him and them.
But they did not create this horrific shooting. They did not, you know, they didn't shoot.
They gave permission. They gave the permission. And they have called for this. They have called for intifada revolution, which is the same thing he yelled last night.
Do you worry that there will be a conflation, though, of the two, those people who are speaking their mind, who really care about what is happening in Gaza, and those people who are like this person who did this horrific shooting, who intend to do harm?
A conflation. I mean, they are calling for intifada. At Columbia University, they call for intifada constantly. They're not quietly. They're loud. They're loud. You can hear it. They make recordings of themselves. So what's the difference?
Are you afraid?
Yes.
What will you do about that?
While many Democrats and so-called journalists like that one put their heads in the sand, the Trump administration is fighting back. Just today, Trump stripped Harvard's student visa program for failing to cooperate with the DHS investigation into pro-terrorist conduct at campus protests. We've all seen it. And not long ago, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem issued this warning to all colleges and universities. Watch this.
Harvard brought these consequences upon themselves. They have promoted and allowed violent activity on campus. They have allowed anti-Semitism, participation with CCP and Chinese infiltration and influence on their campus, and they haven't protected their students. This should be a warning to every other university to get your act together. Get your act together, because we are coming to make sure that these programs that you are facilitating an environment where students can learn, where they're safe, and that they're not discriminated against based on their race or their religion.
Here now with more, Israeli Special Ops veteran Aaron Cohen and the Executive Director of the Lawfare Project, Brooke Goldstein. Thank you both for joining me. Aaron, I'll start with you. Are you at all surprised with the hate that unfolded itself here in Washington, D.C. tonight? These two lovely people, God rest their souls, may their memory be a blessing, gunned down in the prime of their lives?
No, first of all, it's good to see you, Kellyanne. I'm not surprised at all. I've been saying this for the last 2 years. The only direction that all of this calling for the intifada is going to go up, and eventually it's going to hit violence, and that's what has happened. But I want to talk to the root of what I believe is behind all of this, all of the rhetoric, all of the chanting. What we're seeing right now, and I want to talk to this from the counterterrorism space, isn't just chaos on campus, Kellyanne. This is called fifth-generation warfare. No missiles, no soldiers. This is ideological infiltration, psychological manipulation, and algorithmic warfare. And this is how modern enemies of America fight. They're not storming our borders. They are hijacking our platforms. Iran, China, other hostile actors are physically weaponizing social media, which has radicalized the youth and created this destabilized movement throughout our culture. This is actually what's happening, and it's turned Americans against each other from within. And that's what this anti-Semitism is. This is where it's coming from, and that's the root of these protests. This is the modern battlefield.
Scary. Brooke Goldstein. So students go to campuses, we would think, to learn, the old reading, writing, arithmetic. Now they just hear hate, violence, and they're incited to do that on their own. And what Aaron is laying out for us, I'm sure you are all too familiar with as well. But I wanted to ask you, when the president is taking action today, for example, against Harvard, and we've all seen what's happened at Columbia and Penn and other universities, some of our elite universities accept 4 to 5% of all their applicants. What else can be done as a culture for us to make sure that we are breaking the back of this on our college campuses where so much of this political violence on the left is fomenting?
Thank you, Kellyanne, excuse me, for having me on tonight. And really, I think Aaron is right. This is the greatest subversive influence campaign that this country has ever seen. We have a major problem of terror, pro-terror radicalization happening on our campuses. We have foreign funding terror cells. We have judges preventing the Trump administration from enforcing the law, from getting rid of people who are here illegally. Excuse me. And what we saw last night is a direct result of the unchecked spread of this blood libel. These two young people who were celebrating life, who were about to get engaged, were gunned down in cold blood. And you know what, Kellyanne? It could have been me. It could have been any of my friends or colleagues. Just last night, I was at a fundraiser in Miami for Zaka, the nonprofit organization that is tasked with picking up the dead body parts and the blood of Jews murdered and slaughtered and killed and burned alive on October the 7th. It was the same group picking up the blood on the streets of D.C. after this attack. Because whether you're Jewish in Israel or you're Jewish on the streets of America or Paris or London, it doesn't matter. This is Jew hatred. It is not political. And when Pam Bondi was asked this morning, what is the motive of the shooters, though we don't know, he said it himself. He said he's doing this for Gaza, yes, to free Palestine. He says it himself. What pro-Palestinian advocacy is genocidal Jew hatred. And what is so chilling, and I'll end with this, is that Yaron's last post was calling out the United Nations for spreading blood libels. They say that this was a lone shooter. It wasn't. He had co-conspirators, everyone in the mainstream media, everyone at the United Nations, every single Ivy League professor, every social media influencer and left-wing politician that's been spreading blood libels, untruths to dehumanize Jews, to delegitimize Israel, is responsible for the death of these two young people. And only President Trump and God can stop this. And we have to support everything he is doing in the Department of Homeland Security, and especially the Justice Department, which, by the way, just filed a statement of interest in the Lawfare Project's lawsuit against the City University of New York, because this is not free speech. When speech turns into assaults, harassment, threats, actions, violations of civil rights, and ultimately death, it is not protected in this country.
Well, that's really the issue here, Aaron. Brooke lays it out so beautifully. People will say, well, I have free speech rights. I can believe as I believe. I can worship as I want. But when you have Ilhan Omar can't even give a condolence to the families of these two young people, regardless of their religion, their gender, their socioeconomic status, their race. She's asked about the shooting last night of this couple. It could have been any couple. But because they were Jewish, it seems to me, Ilhan Omar, who's got an anti-American, anti-Semitic recent past, can't express condolences. What do we do about folks like that serving behind me in Congress?
Well, I don't think there's anything you can do about her specifically, but what I can do is I can talk about what can be done. Look, Ilhan Omar is an enemy of the state. I don't know how else to put that. She's anti-American. She's anti-Israel. Her and her squad want to see this country destroyed. I almost feel like she's part of it. I feel like she's literally trying to serve Somalia over the American interest. And this is America first time. And I want to say this, and I want to say this to anybody on President Trump's team who may be listening. What we can do, and again, this speaks to the systematic hijacking of the algorithm, Kellyanne, it's time for the United States to partner with the private sector and put together a full spectrum AI platform designed to predict and prevent domestic threats before they strike. From digitally radicalized youth to these ideological lone wolves, this kid, there's a Hispanic kid, 30 years old from Chicago, has never been to Gaza, doesn't speak a word of Arabic, yet he's calling for the death. He murdered two Jews in cold blood, executed them, which means the only way to get at this is to detect the pre-attack behavior, flag signs of the radicalization, and support law enforcement through a real-time behavioral threat intelligence AI-driven program that partners with DHS, local law enforcement, school districts, and even parents, and be able to upload that AI chat with Israeli special operations grade doctrine fused with that advanced AI. And that program, Unleashed, becomes the domestic version of NORAD, but not built for foreign missiles, built for internal threats that start online and in violence. The threat has evolved. We've got the AI now. It's time for law enforcement to evolve and catch up. This chatbot gets put together. You now have a system, a NORAD to blanket every school, every law enforcement agency, and finally, AI-driven behavioral detection with Israeli quality LL to be able to thwart these threats.
Thank you. The technology is certainly there, and the rank anti-Semitism, the raw hatred and political violence, these persons were targeted because they were Jewish. Brooke Goldstein and Aaron Cohen, thank you very much.
Let's go ahead now and bring in DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, the architect and author of this policy. Madam Secretary, you say it is a privilege, not a right, for American schools to be able to host foreigners on their campus.
Yes, that's exactly right. And this program has been in place for a very long time. These policies have been in place for a long time, and Harvard brought these consequences upon themselves. They have promoted and allowed violent activity on campus. They have allowed anti-Semitism, participation with CCP and Chinese infiltration and influence on their campus, and they haven't protected their students. So we have given them multiple opportunities to share criminal activity with us, backgrounds on these students, to let us conduct the oversight into this program that is our responsibility, and they have refused to do so. So today I sent them a letter that said they will no longer be allowed to participate in this student exchange visitor program, and that's up to 27% of their enrolled students. So it's significant. Any foreign student that wishes to get an education in this country that is attending Harvard and not participating in this criminal activity, they will have to find another university to go to, because Harvard has chosen instead to not protect their students and to allow this kind of violent and discriminatory action continue.
So as you mentioned, 18% of Harvard's freshman class this year are foreign. They're foreigners here on student visas. What happens? Where do they go now? What do they do?
Yeah, we have given Harvard multiple opportunities to give us the documentation that we've requested to conduct oversight. We've asked them for the backgrounds on students that attend their university, their criminal activity on campus, off of campus, any video or audio footage they have of this violent activity, and they have just simply not complied. This is something that they need to do in order to comply with this program as it was established. And so, unfortunately, all of their foreign students will face the consequences of Harvard's lack of protecting the individuals that go there. So 27% of their students are foreign students, and they will have to find some other university to go to, and hopefully they find one that cares about them and provides a safe environment.
Does that mean that the student visas of this freshman class won't be revoked? It will just be revoked for them to attend Harvard specifically. Is that right? I want to make sure I'm understanding the particulars.
Yeah, the decision that's made today based on what Harvard has done is specifically applying to that university, not to the individual students. So the university will no longer be able to participate in this program. They will not be allowed to have foreign students because we have gone back to them multiple times, asked them to disclose this information, which other universities have and need to do in order to participate in the Student and Exchange Visitor Program, and Harvard simply has not done it. Harvard has a history of allowing not just protests, but violent protests where students were assaulted, they were discriminated against, they were verbally abused, and they've even facilitated a training for a paramilitary group affiliated with the CCP. So it's not just pro-Hamas activities that they have allowed to have happen on their campus. They've also allowed participation with Communist China, who considers the United States one of their greatest enemies. This is something we're not going to continue to allow to have happen. This is something I'm responsible for, is to provide this type of oversight, and we're going to ensure that every university protects every single one of their students on their campuses, whether they're from the United States or another country. They need to be safe. They don't deserve to have this kind of anti-Semitic or any other kind of discrimination that may face them based on their race going forward.
So Israel's Consul General here in New York joined our air a short while ago. He really hammered home his case, which is that he says the Qataris are at fault here. They are the ones exporting anti-Israel thought and rot to colleges across the United States. How do you see that? What's your reaction to that?
I think it was very interesting to listen to the Israeli ambassador to the UN this morning as well, that was doing several interviews where he talked about, he felt like a lot of the anti-Semitism that we saw across the country in the last year or two started on these college campuses. And I really do believe that what these colleges have done by facilitating an environment that allows this kind of hatred to grow and to spread, and misinformation to continue to be proliferated among these students is wrong. And it's created a situation now where we have racism and violence and assaults happening. And this student program was intended for students who wanted to come here and learn in America, appreciated the wonderful opportunity that it provided. And it's morphed into this terrible situation where people are really victims of the system. So we're bringing the oversight that the last administration did not bring, and we're going to make sure that this student and exchange program provides an environment where students can learn and not be discriminated against.
But do you believe, Madam Secretary, that the Qataris in particular are behind a lot of the anti-Semitism you just described? Are they providing fuel that creates this fire?
You know, I'm not an expert in this area. I think that there's validity to what he has said, but I also think that we've got a lot of influences here, and we've got a lot of people that have facilitated this that have a different agenda. Some of these universities have even barred law enforcement officers from coming on campus and haven't even allowed there to be basic law and order on the areas that they're responsible for. So we're going to continue to do our investigations and make sure that what the Department of Homeland Security is responsible for, it will be done with integrity for the way that Congress laid out that programs should work, and the opportunities that we have to allow people to come into this country, learn, and to be a part of a country that promotes freedom and liberty and that everybody is equal. That's not what Harvard is doing, and that's not what we're seeing in some of these college campuses.
Could you foresee, or are you now considering similar moves with other universities like Columbia that has allowed Jewish students to be threatened and made unsafe?
Absolutely. We are absolutely, this should be a warning to every other university to get your act together. Get your act together, because we are coming to make sure that these programs, that you are facilitating an environment where students can learn, where they're safe, and that they're not discriminated against based on their race or their religion. Anti-Semitism will not be stood for, and any participation with a country or an entity or a terrorist group that hates America and perpetuates this kind of violence, we will stop it, and we will not allow that to happen, especially in places where our kids need to grow up and really learn what this country is about, what the world is about, and what it means to promote freedom and liberty.
There's a bit of a sort of cultural academic tradition, as you are well aware, like with these big liberal arts institutions in the United States, that law enforcement is kept off campus. They feel, administrators in these places like Harvard and Columbia feel like they want to manage poor behavior, even illegal activity on the part of students. Is that about to completely become a thing of the past? Are we watching that be eradicated in real time?
You know, we've been in communication with these leaders of these universities, telling them we expect them to keep their students safe. We expect them, they can use their campus police and their policies, but when they're not effective and they're not even upholding basic campus safety, we are going to intervene, and they're not going to be allowed to get privileges that we have put forward as far as these types of programs. So these students, too, feel victimized and have been harmed for a long time under the policies of some of these colleges. And so we will take enforcement actions, and they will no longer have federal support.
Harvard already responding to this news, saying it's illegal. We could anticipate some kind of battle royale through the courts. But for now, we wish you the best. Secretary Noem, thanks so much for joining us with this.
Tell them to bring it. I'm on the side of America, and they need to be too.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You bet it is. You bet it is. Here with us for his take, Ned Ryan, American Majority CEO. So, Ned, Harvard's filing a lawsuit, federal court. It's confident they're going to get an injunction, which they probably will, in the First Circuit. my prediction. I think the most shocking thing that we've learned, though, we knew the pro-terrorist element was there, but how much these universities, Ned, depend on foreign students, the cash, including sympathizers of our enemies. 27% foreign student enrollment last year at Harvard.
Yeah, you figure that's about 6,800 students at Harvard that are on student visas. If you do the quick math, room, board, tuition for the undergraduates at Harvard's about $83,000. I mean, this is over $560 million in annual tuition that would cost Harvard. And if you extrapolate it for 4 years, that's multiple billions that Harvard would be experiencing if they refuse to comply with the DHS requests. To know why its foreign student body continues to harass the Jewish population and obviously continuing its DEI policies. But I mean, this to me it's just common sense. I mean, we've been tolerating ourselves to death. This is a privilege. It's not a right to have a student visa to be here. And Harvard, it's pretty rich that Harvard's claiming to be an independent institution when it still wants to have taxpayer dollars and government funding while it sits on a $53 billion endowment, Laura. I mean, this is pretty shocking when you realize what's going on. I have to tell you today, the big, beautiful bill, one of the things I thought was the best part of it, 21% tax on endowments the size of Harvard's. I think that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, the media, in some part, is trying to blame Elon Musk's X for the rise in anti-Semitism. This was an interesting turn today. Watch.
Don't the leaders of Twitter or X pretty much ignore the anti-Semitism going on that site?
These are their own rules, and time again, they fail to enforce their own rules. It's part of the problem.
Ned, if you go into the community guidelines in Twitter, it's clearly this type of hate speech is not tolerated, is taken down. Maybe it's not taken down sometimes as fast as we all want it to be, but there is a process. I think they do try to move on that. But I thought that was a really cheap shot, even coming from Jake Tapper.
Yeah, shocking. Jake Tapper, we could have a long conversation about his morals and ethics, but this is just deflection. Anti-Semitism is deeply ingrained in the un-American left. I mean, we could talk about the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanction movement, that is really has a strong foothold on a lot of our campuses that increases the anti-Semitic behavior. So just a weak attempt at deflection for something that I think is a very real issue with the un-American left. And we're seeing it play out not only on college campuses, but sadly last night in D.C.
Well, Ned, I have to say, American universities used to be primarily for Americans. That's becoming increasingly less so. And I think we have to ask our question. Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to have foreign students. There's no problem having foreign students, but they have to want to be part of the American understanding and experience while they're here. I mean, it's a privilege to be here.
I think we've got a real issue with these indoctrination centers of higher learning, not only indoctrinating youth to hate their country, but fomenting violence. And also at the same time, if you look at the letter from Secretary Noem, colluding with nations that are existential threats to our country, like China and Iran. I think we've got a huge problem on colleges and universities right now.
Yeah, lose the foreign money altogether. We'll see how things change. Correct. Ned, thank you so much.
More Columbia University students will be receiving their diplomas today, despite planned pro-Palestinian protests. Already, the ceremonies have seen chaos as the school's president was drowned out by disruptors yesterday.
To be the kind of leaders Rowan was talking about. Curious, determined, and open-minded. You've made it through one of the most rigorous schools in the world. You arrested us! You arrested us!
Columbia student Jessica Schwab took that video that you just saw, and she joins me now. Jessica, good morning to you. So we saw a small portion of your video. What happened in full?
Yeah, so I was sitting towards the back of the audience, and I remember when Dean Surratt introduced Acting President Claire Shipman, almost immediately she was booed. People started heckling her from throughout the audience and saying, "You arrested us," and shouting expletives, and just were devoted to not letting her speak.
How did you feel about that?
I thought that it was very disrespectful, and a crowd should not be allowed to unilaterally decide what speech is allowed to be heard. And it seems very paradoxical because on graduation day from an Ivy League university, that seemed to be the one liberal value that was not imparted into their minds and it was not included in their curriculum, apparently.
Yeah, and would you describe this as a vocal minority or a majority of students who are taking issue with the acting president and obviously the current administration?
Yeah, so I think in the anti-Israel protests, those who are actually actively participating in them may be more of a minority of the overall student body. However, yesterday, what I heard and what I saw at graduation, there were people who were in keffiyehs and also not in keffiyehs who were very adamant about shouting her down.
Wow. Well, you know, the Trump administration, President Trump, is trying to reshape higher education to get back to education, get rid of DEI, obviously get rid of anti-Semitism. Do you think it will be successful in the long run?
I think that when the Trump administration started withholding federal funding from Columbia University, you started seeing punishments come down more strongly and student conduct policy actually being enforced, like with the Hamilton Hall arrestees. They were finally disciplined, and Claire Shipman also seems to be also very devoted to making sure policy is enforced and that people can study, because just recently, on May 7th, Butler Library, the main Butler in Columbia University, was occupied by these anti-Israel radicals during the final exam period, and there were students in there who were just trying to study, and she made it her mission to restore order.
Yeah. Well, you said that you were sitting in the back, towards the back of that crowd of people, which means that you just graduated, so congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Just really quickly, what was your overall experience like at Columbia?
I made hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of friendships, is what I would say, considering the tuition, in my opinion, is way too overpriced, but the best friends I made there are definitely worth that, and we got to experience the protest season together, and so that was a lot of trauma bonding.
How about we say memorable? Yeah.
Very memorable.
Hey, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
Yeah.
Mom's waiting in the wings. I don't know how she feels about the hundreds of thousands in friendships, but you did get a wonderful job out of it at the Washington Free Beacon, so we thank you so much for joining us with your experience and sharing that video with us. Jessica, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Brett Baer. Breaking tonight, we're following two major stories. Outrage around the world over the slaughter of two Israeli embassy workers outside a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C. We'll have a full report, and I'll talk to Israel's ambassador to the U.S. in just a few minutes. First up, tonight, the Trump administration is revoking Harvard's ability to enroll international students. It's the latest blowback from what the president's team calls the school's failure to prevent attacks against Jewish students on campus. Correspondent Molly Line starts us off tonight from Boston. Good evening, Molly.
Good evening, Brett. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said today that Harvard University has a history of not just allowing protests, but violent protests, as she made this major announcement.
Declaring it as a privilege, not a right, the Trump administration is revoking Harvard's student visa program effective immediately.
Harvard brought these consequences upon themselves. They have promoted and allowed violent activity on campus. They have allowed anti-Semitism, participation with CCP and Chinese infiltration and influence on their campus, and they haven't protected their students.
This means Harvard can no longer enroll foreign students, and existing foreign students, who currently make up 27% of Harvard's student body, DHS says they must transfer or lose their legal status to reside in the U.S. This comes after Harvard failed to meet the administration's demands for disciplinary records related to its international students, and represents another major strike to the university, which is currently fighting dramatic cuts to federal research funding. Harvard responded to the move with a strongly worded statement declaring the government's action to be unlawful, writing, "We are working quickly to provide guidance and support to members of our community. This retaliatory action threatens serious harm to the Harvard community and our country and undermines Harvard's academic and research mission."
Noam has given Harvard 72 hours to turn over a multitude of documents of paperwork in order to regain the opportunity to get their certification back. This comes as, in another case, a California-based federal judge, Jeffrey White, a Bush 41 appointee, is temporarily blocking the Trump administration from terminating the legal status of international students while that litigation continues. Brett?
Okay, Molly, thank you.
The wave of anti-Semitic violence gripping our nation, escalating to murder overnight after 2 Israeli diplomats were shot and killed in the nation's capital.
And here in New York, anti-Semitic protests broke out yet again at Columbia University's graduation ceremony, with anti-Israel protesters clashing with police and burning their diplomas. Jeff Lax is a CUNY law professor and the director of students, alumni, and faculty for equality on campus, and he joins me now. Jeff, thank you for joining us. I'm sure you're going to want to react to both of these stories, but first, this horrific shooting that took place, killing 2 Israelis in the prime of their lives, exiting a place that should be safe. It was an event for young people to further their career, and seeing their images makes it all the more real and tragic. And you say that this was inevitable and not surprising.
Yeah, I think like millions of Jews across the country today, I think they're waking up and they are heartbroken for this young couple, and they're angry. They don't want to hear we condemn violence. They don't want that. They want to hear, what are you going to do about it? Because, yeah, this was predictable and inevitable. When you have almost daily riots calling for the genocide of Jews, globalize the Intifada, which is a literal call to kill Jews all over the world, it is inevitable that you're going to have a Jew killed. And if they don't do something, there are going to be more of these incidents to come.
So what steps can be taken?
Well, I think first of all, the DOJ must open up a criminal investigation into every single group that has ties to Hamas, starting with CARE, that was an unindicted co-conspirator with Hamas in the biggest terror financing case in U.S. history, that they were funneling money to Hamas. And secondly, going through groups like SJP, WOL, AMP, any group tied to Hamas there should be an inquiry by Congress. There should be second, an inquiry by Congress as well to find out where the money's coming from, why this is happening. And third, I think Linda McMahon should meet with the accrediting agencies of these schools, universities, and talk to them about protecting every group and making sure that if the universities don't protect their students, don't protect harassment, discrimination, and violence, that they lose their accreditation.
What about what happened outside of Columbia University after the graduation? There were keffiyeh-wearing anti-Israel protesters. They ripped up and burned their diplomas. There was at least 1 arrest.
Well, I think a Columbia diploma nowadays is worth about as much burnt as it is in full. What she said yesterday was outrageous. She said President Claire Shipman. Mm-hmm. She said her community mourned the absence of Mahmoud Khalil, who led a criminal group that was committing violence and harassment against Jews. And 2 judges now have said, you are going to be deported for what you did. And she said you know what she should be mourning? She's going to come out today with an outrageous statement saying, I condemn the violence against the Jewish people. But she mourned one of the people who probably was an instigator fomenting what happened.
Along those lines, what happens on campuses throughout our country now? Because, Jeff, my worry is that if the events of October 7th led people on October 8th to celebrate and protest in favor of the terrorists, what's going to happen with this suspect? Is he going to be celebrated? Worse, is he going to be emulated?
I think Jews feel like target practice this morning. I think that's the fear, and I think that's why there have to be concrete actions. I'm calling out for Pam Bondi, Mike Johnson, and Linda McMahon. Open up investigations by Congress, look into the groups tied to Hamas, both criminally by the DOJ and by Congress with an inquiry by an investigation.
Yeah. And President Trump already released a Truth Social post. These horrible D.C. killings based obviously on anti-Semitism must end. Now hatred and radicalism has no place in the USA. Condolences to the families of the victims. So sad that such things as this can happen. God bless you all. What would you like to hear from the president today regarding this?
I would really like to hear that he's opening up investigations, that he's going to talk to the DOJ, that he's going to talk to Congress about an investigation, and that he talks to Linda McMahon before she does whatever she does with the Education Department, whether she disbands it or not. I think school accreditation must be at stake. They have to realize how serious this is. We see now, this morning, how serious it is. A lot of people are going to wake up today and come to, not just Jews, but decent people across the country. They're going to realize this is not really about Jews. These same people also hate America. They are coming after America, capitalism. They hate Christians too. It's not just the Jews.
So you don't think, independent of some act by Donald Trump, some act by Linda McMahon, these schools, our education system is going to look at what happened and say, hey, now we need to stop and we need to act up and stop anti-Semitism? You don't think that's going to happen?
I'll tell you, Todd, on a normal day I would laugh at that, but I'm not in a laughing mood today. And no is the answer. We have seen that for many years.
What's it going to take?
Yeah,
What's it
and
gonna
the
take?
suspect is a Illinois native, and we need to know where he was radicalized, 30 years old, so just out of school age, but could it have happened there? Jeff, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.